Hello, dear viewers. Welcome to Life Diary. My name is Mikhailu, and today I want to share a story about two strangers, an ordinary picnic, and a quiet decision that changed everything. They came there feeling out of place, ready to leave early, not looking for anything special. But one of them chose to stay a little longer, and that moment slowly turned into love, family, and a life built together. If you enjoy real, emotional stories about life and love, please subscribe to the channel and stay with us. Hello, dear viewer. My name is David. I'm 35 years old, and I live in a quiet residential area on the edge of the city. I work in IT, mostly remote. My days usually look the same: laptop, meetings, deadlines, coffee, and silence. I'm good at my job, but if I'm honest, my life outside of work has become very small over the years. I didn't plan to go to that picnic. A colleague from work mentioned it a few days earlier. Just a casual weekend picnic in the park, people from different circles, nothing special. I nodded, said, maybe, and forgot about it. Social events like that always felt exhausting to me. Too many conversations, too many questions, too much pretending that everything is fine. On the morning of the picnic, I almost sent a message saying I wouldn't come. I was tired. I had worked late the night before, and the idea of spending my Saturday with strangers didn't excite me at all. Still, something pushed me to go. Maybe boredom. Maybe the feeling that if I stayed home again, the day would disappear without leaving any trace. I arrived at the park a little after noon. The weather was warm, but not too sunny. People were already there, sitting in groups, laughing, unpacking food, playing music. I felt out of place immediately. I greeted a few familiar faces, then walked away and found an empty picnic table near the trees. I poured myself some coffee and opened my laptop, pretending I had something important to do. It was easier than trying to fit in. That's when I noticed her. She arrived with two other women. She looked uncomfortable, like someone who didn't really want to be there. She smiled politely, but her eyes kept searching for something familiar and never finding it. I didn't know her name then. I didn't know she was a dancer. I only noticed how she stood slightly apart, holding her bag like it gave her a reason to stay. She sat down on a blanket with the others, listened more than she talked. Every few minutes, she checked her phone. I recognized that behavior. I had done the same thing at events like this, waiting for the right moment to leave without being rude. For a while, our worlds didn't touch at all. I stayed at my table. She stayed with her group. People moved around. Conversations blended together. Music got louder. Time passed slowly. At some point, she stood up and walked toward the trash bins. When she passed my table, our eyes met for a brief second. Nothing dramatic. No smile. Just a neutral look, like two people silently acknowledging each other's existence. Then she looked away and kept walking. I didn't think much of it. The picnic felt endless. My colleague came over once, made small talk, then left again. I checked the time and told myself I would stay another 10 minutes. That was my usual limit. From where I sat, I could see her again. She was standing now, talking on the phone, her back turned to the group. Her posture was tense. When she ended the call, she let out a slow breath, as if she had made a decision she wasn't fully comfortable with. Later, I would learn that she hadn't wanted to come at all, that she had been invited by someone new from her dance studio, that she almost canceled twice that morning. But at that moment, all I saw was a woman who looked like she didn't belong there any more than I did. People started packing up. Some left early, waving goodbye. The picnic slowly lost its energy. I closed my laptop and stood up, ready to go. That's when she looked around, as if searching for a reason to stay just a little longer. And somehow, without knowing why, I stayed too. Not because of her. At least, that's what I told myself then. I stayed because I wasn't in a hurry. Because the day hadn't been completely wasted. Because sometimes it felt safer not to rush back to an empty apartment. She sat down again, this time closer to where I was standing. Not next to me, just closer than before. We still didn't talk. We didn't know each other. But for the first time that day, leaving didn't feel urgent. I had already decided I would leave in a few minutes. I was standing near the picnic table, holding my empty coffee cup, watching people fold blankets and pack containers back into bags. The park felt quieter now. The loud conversations were gone, replaced by soft background noise and the sound of footsteps on the grass. She was still there. She had moved away from her group and stood near the long wooden table where leftover food was placed. Plates, napkins, half-empty bottles. She looked at them like someone who wasn't sure whether she was allowed to take anything. I recognized that hesitation. It was the same feeling I had when I first arrived. I walked over to throw away my cup. When I reached the trash bin, I noticed she was trying to close a thermos. The lid didn't seem to fit properly. She twisted it once, then again, then sighed quietly. Without really thinking, I said, "Sometimes it only closes if you turn it the other way first." She looked at me, slightly surprised, then handed it to me without hesitation. Our hands didn't touch. I took the thermos, turned the lid carefully, and it clicked into place. "There," I said. "That should work." "Thank you," she replied. Her voice was calm, a little tired. I was about to give up. She took it back and smiled briefly. Not a big smile, just enough to be polite. We stood there for a second, both of us unsure what to do next. It felt awkward, but not uncomfortable. Like two people waiting for a bus that hadn't arrived yet. "I'm David," I said finally. "Monica," she answered. "Nice to meet you." We didn't shake hands. It didn't feel necessary. "So," I said, gesturing vaguely toward the picnic, "did you enjoy this?" She hesitated, then shrugged. "Honestly, not really. But it's not terrible either." I nodded. "That's exactly how I describe it." That made her smile again. This time it stayed a little longer. We moved to the side of the table, so we weren't in anyone's way. The conversation didn't suddenly become deep or meaningful. It stayed simple. She asked what I did. I told her I worked in IT, mostly from home. She said she was a dancer, working with a few studios, sometimes teaching, sometimes performing. I admitted I didn't know much about dance. She said that was normal. "I didn't want to come today," she said, looking toward the path leading out of the park. "A friend invited me. New people. I almost canceled." "I almost didn't come either," I replied. "I'm glad I didn't, though. At least now I know I'm not the only one who felt out of place." She laughed quietly. "That helps more than you think." People kept passing us, saying quick goodbyes. The picnic was clearly ending. Someone turned off the speaker. Another person stacked empty plates. "I should probably go," Monica said. I told myself I wouldn't stay long. "Me too," I said. Neither of us moved. Instead, we walked a few steps and sat down at the end of the picnic table. The surface was warm from the sun. We sat with some space between us, not too close, not too far. She looked at her phone, then put it back into her bag. "No messages," she said, almost to herself. I didn't ask who she was expecting to hear from. For a moment, we just watched the park. A couple walked their dog past us. A child ran after a ball. Everything felt ordinary, and somehow that made it easier to breathe. "What made you stay?" she asked suddenly. I thought about it. I guess I didn't want to go home yet. "My apartment is very quiet." She nodded slowly. "Mine too." That was it. No dramatic confession. No emotional speech. Just a shared understanding. Someone from her group called her name from across the park. She raised her hand to show she heard them, then turned back to me. "They're leaving," she said. "I could go with them." "But you're not sure you want to," I said. She smiled again. "I think I want to stay a bit longer." "Me too," I replied. We talked about small things after that. Favorite parks. Bad coffee. How strange it feels to meet new people in your 30s. She told me she moved to the city a few years ago. I told her I'd lived here most of my life. There was no pressure. No flirting. Just two people filling the space between strangers and something more familiar. As the sun lowered and the picnic area emptied, I realized I wasn't checking the time anymore. She stayed. Not because she had to. Not because she promised anyone she would. She stayed because, for the first time that day, leaving didn't feel like the right choice. The park looked different when most people had already left. The noise faded. The space opened up, and everything felt slower. The picnic tables were almost empty now. Only a few blankets remained on the grass, forgotten or waiting to be picked up. Monica and I were still sitting at the table, facing the open field. The late afternoon light made the place feel calmer, almost private, even though it was still a public park. "I didn't expect to stay this long," she said quietly. "Me neither," I replied. "I usually leave early. Or I don't come at all." She smiled at that, but there was something thoughtful in her expression. She wasn't just being polite anymore. She looked present, like she had made a small internal decision. A woman from the organizing group walked past us with a bag of trash. She stopped and asked if we could help gather a few leftover items. We both stood up without thinking and started collecting cups and napkins from nearby tables. It felt natural, like we had known each other longer than an hour. As we worked, The conversation shifted without effort. I don't usually talk about this, Monica said while folding a blanket. But days like today make me realize how alone I've been feeling lately. I didn't interrupt her. I'm always surrounded by people, she continued. Dance studios, rehearsals, performances. But it's all very temporary. You meet people, work together, then everyone moves on. I nodded. I get that. I'm alone most of the time too. Even when I'm busy, it doesn't always feel meaningful. She looked at me for a moment, as if deciding whether to say more. I had a long relationship before, she said. It ended quietly. No drama. We just stopped moving in the same direction. After that, I focused on work. It felt safer. I did the same, I admitted. After my last relationship, I stopped trying. Work was easier. Predictable. We carried the trash bag together to the bin. When we returned, the picnic area was almost empty. Only a few people remained in the distance. We sat back down, closer this time, not because we planned it, but because the table felt too big otherwise. Can I ask you something? Monica said. Sure. Why did you really stay? I thought about it longer than before. I think I stayed because talking to you didn't feel like effort. And because leaving suddenly felt like I'd be walking away from something I didn't fully understand yet. She nodded slowly. That makes sense. She looked down at her hands. I stayed because I'm tired of leaving. I always leave early. Today, I wanted to see what would happen if I didn't. The honesty of that moment stayed with me. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the grass. The air cooled slightly. I noticed she crossed her arms, and without thinking, I offered her my jacket. She hesitated. Are you sure? Yeah. She took it and thanked me softly. We sat there for a while without speaking. It wasn't awkward. It felt earned. Eventually, she broke the silence. You know, I almost didn't come today. I stood by my door for 10 minutes, telling myself it wasn't worth it. I almost texted to cancel, I said. I even wrote the message. What stopped you? I didn't want another empty weekend. She smiled at that, not sadly, but with understanding. As the park lights slowly turned on, we realized we were among the last people there. Someone locked a nearby storage box. A groundskeeper walked past and nodded at us. I think this is the end, Monica said, looking around. Yeah, I replied. It looks like it. She stood up, handed me back the jacket, then paused. I'm glad I stayed, she said. So am I. There was a brief silence, the kind where a decision waits to be made. Would you like to get coffee sometime? I asked. Not today, just sometime. She smiled, this time openly. I'd like that. We exchanged numbers. No rush. No pressure. As we walked toward the exit of the park together, she turned to me and said, if I had left earlier, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I looked at her and realized she was right. That picnic wasn't special because of what happened there. It was special because of what didn't. She didn't leave, and neither did I. After the picnic, life didn't suddenly change. There were no dramatic messages that night, no long phone calls until morning. We both went home, back to our separate apartments, back to our routines. But something had shifted quietly, and we both felt it. The next day, Monica texted first. Just a simple message asking how my Sunday was going. I answered honestly. We didn't try to impress each other. The conversation flowed naturally, with pauses that felt normal, not forced. A few days later, we met for coffee. It wasn't a romantic cafe, just a small place near her dance studio. She arrived straight from rehearsal, hair tied back, tired but relaxed. I came after work, laptop still in my bag, mind half full of unfinished tasks. We talked for 2 hours. About work. About how different our schedules were. About how strange it felt to start something new in our 30s, when most people around us already seemed settled. There were moments of silence, but they didn't feel uncomfortable. They felt honest. We started seeing each other once or twice a week after that. Sometimes coffee, sometimes long walks through the city. I went to one of her rehearsals and sat quietly in the back, watching her move with a focus I admired. She came to my place one evening, saw my simple apartment, the desk by the window, the quiet order of everything. This feels very you, she said. I wasn't sure if that was a compliment, but it felt like one. Still, things weren't easy. My work schedule often clashed with her rehearsals. There were days when she was exhausted, and I was still thinking about deadlines. There were evenings when one of us had to cancel plans, and the other pretended it didn't bother them. One night, after I canceled dinner because of an urgent project, she was quiet on the phone. I understand, she said. I really do. But I could hear the distance in her voice. We didn't argue. Instead, a few days later, we talked. I don't want this to become another thing that slowly fades, Monica said as we sat on a bench near the river. I've had enough of that. Me too, I answered. But I don't know how to do this perfectly. I'm not asking for perfect, she said. I'm asking for effort. That conversation changed something. We started being more honest about what we needed. I learned to close my laptop earlier some evenings. She learned to say when she was too tired instead of forcing herself to be cheerful. Months passed. We grew closer in small, quiet ways. Grocery shopping together. Late-night conversations about fears we had never said out loud before. She told me she was afraid of giving too much and losing herself. I told her I was afraid of letting someone in and losing my stability. One evening, she stayed over after a long day. We cooked dinner together, moved around my small kitchen without bumping into each other, as if we had practiced it before. After dinner, we sat on the couch, the city lights visible through the window. I don't like packing a bag every time, she said softly. It makes everything feel temporary. I understood what she meant. A few weeks later, I asked her to move in. Not in a dramatic way, just a quiet conversation at the table after breakfast. We don't have to rush, I said, but I'd like us to build something real. Together. She didn't answer immediately. She thought about it, asked practical questions, talked about her schedule, her work, her need for space. Then she nodded. I want that too. Living together wasn't perfect either. There were habits to adjust to. Her music playing while I worked. My need for quiet when she needed movement. But instead of pulling us apart, those differences forced us to communicate. One evening, as we cleaned the kitchen, she looked at me and said, "You know, if I had left that picnic early, none of this would exist." I smiled. If you had left, I would have gone home and forgotten about the day completely. She laughed softly. Funny how small choices change everything. We didn't talk about the future in big words. No grand plans. But slowly, naturally, we started acting like a family in the making. And it all began because two strangers chose not to walk away. Life settled into something steady after we moved in together. Not exciting in a dramatic way, not perfect, but real. Mornings started with quiet routines. I worked from home most days, my laptop open near the window. Monica left early for rehearsals, stretching in the hallway while coffee brewed. Some evenings we barely spoke because we were tired. Other nights we talked for hours about nothing important. That balance mattered. A year after the picnic, we returned to the same park. It wasn't planned as something symbolic. We were just walking on a Sunday afternoon, and Monica suggested taking a longer route. When we reached the familiar picnic area, she stopped without saying anything. The tables were the same. The trees looked taller somehow. Different people sat where we once had, unaware of what that place meant to us. "This is where it was," she said. I nodded. I remember. We sat down at the end of the same long table. No food, no crowd. Just the two of us and the quiet sound of the park. Monica leaned back and looked around. "I really didn't want to come that day," she said. "I remember standing in my apartment, thinking I would feel even worse if I went. And now?" I asked. "Now I know it was the best decision I didn't want to make." We stayed there for a while, watching people pass. Couples, families, children running through the grass. It didn't make us feel rushed. It made us feel ready. A few months later, we got married. No big ceremony. Close friends, family, simple vows. Monica danced at the reception, barefoot, laughing. I watched her and felt a calm I had never known before. We talked about children carefully, honestly, with fear and hope mixed together. When she told me she was pregnant, she cried first, then laughed, then cried again. I held her and felt something settle into place. Our daughter was born on a quiet morning. I stood next to Monica, overwhelmed and unsure, and then everything became clear at once. Life wasn't about avoiding loneliness anymore. It was about showing up. Years passed. We built a family, not by accident, but by choosing each other again and again. There were hard days. There were arguments. There were moments of doubt. But there was also trust, patience, and the understanding that love doesn't always arrive loudly. One afternoon, years later, we went back to the park as a family. Monica carried a picnic blanket. Our daughter ran ahead of us, pointing at birds, asking questions that never ended. We sat down near the same spot. Monica looked at me and smiled. "If I had left that day," she said, this wouldn't exist. I looked at our daughter, then back at her. If you had left, I would have gone home and stayed the same. She reached for my hand. Sometimes love starts when you decide not to rush. That picnic wasn't magic. It wasn't fate in a dramatic sense. It was two tired people who stayed a little longer than planned. And that made all the difference. Thank you for staying with this story until the end. Sometimes life changes not because of big decisions, but because we choose not to leave too early. This story reminds us that love can begin quietly, in the most ordinary moments. What do you think about this story? Would you have stayed at that picnic, or would you have left early? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd really love to read them.